The night was quiet, the mansion bathed in moonlight. Chioma stood at the window, her silk robe slipping off her shoulders as she stared at the city lights below. Emeka watched her from the doorway, his breath catching at the sight of her, so beautiful, so untouchable. She was his wife, yet she felt like a dream he wasn't allowed to have. "Chioma," he said, his voice low, rough with wants. She turned, her eyes meeting his, and in that moment, the walls between them crumbled. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands cupping her face as if she might vanish if he held her too tightly. "This wasn't part of the deal," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Forget the deal," he murmured, "tonight, it's just us." The first night together was supposed to be a performance, a charade for the world to see. But as his pencil tangled in, they discovered a truth neither of them could deny: this was more than an arrangement. This was love, raw, reckless, and real. But when the sun rose, the world would come crashing back in. Secrets would surface, old wounds would reopen, and the fragile bond they'd forged would be tested. In a marriage built on lies, could their love survive the truth? She was innocence wrapped in strength. He was power cloaked in solitude. Their marriage was a deal, a transaction forged in desperation and duty. But with every stolen glance, every accidental touch, the lines between business and passion blurred. Chioma Nwankwo never imagined she'd marry a man like Emeka Okonkwo, a billionaire CEO with a reputation as cold as his heart. And Emeka never thought he'd fall for a woman who challenged him at every turn, who made him question everything he thought he knew about love. In a world of secrets, scandals, and simmering desire, their hearts dared to defy the rules. But when the stakes are this high, can love survive, or will it destroy them both? Asterisk. She was innocent. He was untouchable. Their marriage was a deal, but their love would rewrite the rules. Asterisk. The rain poured relentlessly over Lagos, turning the bustling streets into rivers of chaos. Chioma Nwankwo tightened her grip on her umbrella as she hurried into the towering glass building that housed Okonkwo Industries. Her heart pounded in her chest, not just from the sprint through the rain, but from the weight of what she was about to do. She had never imagined herself here, in the heart of the city's most prestigious business district, about to meet the man who held her family's fate in his hands. Emeka Okonkwo, CEO, billionaire, and Lagos's most notorious playboy. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like an eternity. Chioma's reflection in the mirrored walls stared back at her, a young woman in a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back into a neat bun, her face free of makeup except for a touch of lip gloss. She looked every bit the ordinary accountant she was, not someone who belonged in the same room as a man. Like Emeka. When the doors slid open, she was greeted by a sleek, modern office bathed in soft golden light. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, but Chioma's attention was immediately drawn to the man standing by the window, his back to her. Emeka Okonkwo was taller than she'd expected, his broad shoulders accentuated by the tailored suit he wore. He turned slowly, and Chioma's breath caught in her throat. His sharp jawline, piercing dark eyes, and the faint scar above his eyebrow gave him an air of danger and mystery. He was even more handsome in person than in the tabloids, and it unnerved her. "Miss Nwankwo," he said, his voice deep and smooth, like velvet. "I've been expecting you." Chioma swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Mr. Okonkwo, thank you for seeing me." He gestured to the plush chair in front of his desk. "Sit." She obeyed, her hands trembling as she clutched her bag. Emeka took his seat across from her, his eyes never leaving hers. "I understand you've come to discuss your father's debt," he said, cutting straight to the point. Chioma nodded. "Yes, sir. My father's business is struggling, and he owes your company a significant amount. I was hoping we could work out a payment plan." Emeka held up a hand, silencing her. "Your father's debt is substantial, Miss Nwankwo. A payment plan won't suffice." Her heart sank. Then what do you suggest? He leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her squirm. I have a proposition for you. Chioma frowned. A proposition? Yes. He steepled his fingers, his expression unreadable. I'm in need of a wife. She blinked, certain she'd misheard him. A wife? A temporary one, he clarified. My family is pressuring me to settle down, and I need someone to play the part. Marry me, and I'll clear your father's debt. Chioma's mind raced. This had to be a joke. You can't be serious. I'm very serious, he said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. It's a simple arrangement. You'll have everything you could ever want, money, luxury, status. In return, you'll be my wife in name only. After a year, we'll divorce, and you'll be free to live your life. She stared at him, trying to process his words. Why me? A faint smile tugged at his lips. Because you're not like the women I usually associate with. You're refreshingly ordinary. Chioma bristled at the backhanded compliment but said nothing. Think about it, Emeka said, standing. But don't take too long. My offer expires at midnight. Chioma stepped out of the Okonkwo Industries building, the rain still falling in sheets. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more overwhelming than the last. Emeka's proposal echoed in her ears, a mix of absurdity and temptation. A wife. In name only. A year of luxury in exchange for her freedom, asterisk. She hailed a taxi, her hands trembling as she gave the driver her address. The ride home was a blur, the city lights reflecting off the wet streets like scattered stars. When she finally arrived at her modest apartment, she found her father waiting for her, his face etched with worry. Chioma, he said, rising from the couch. How did it go? She forced a smile, though her heart ached at the sight of him. Her father, once a proud and vibrant man, now looked frail and defeated. The weight of his failing business had taken its toll. I spoke with Mr. Okonkwo, she said carefully. He's considering our situation. Her father sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. I don't know what we'll do if he doesn't agree to a payment plan. We could lose everything. Chioma's chest tightened. She couldn't bear to see her father like this, broken and desperate. She thought of Emeka's offer, the way he'd looked at her with those piercing eyes, and the promise of a life free from financial burdens. Don't worry, Papa, she said softly. I'll figure something out. That night, as she lay in bed, Chioma stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She thought of her family, their struggles, and the life they'd once had. She thought of Emeka, his commanding presence, and the strange pull she'd felt toward him. By the time the clock struck 11:30 p.m., she knew what she had to do. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Chioma arrived back at Okonkwo Industries. The building was eerily quiet, the lobby lit only by the soft glow of security lights. She took the elevator to the penthouse, her heart pounding with every passing floor. When the doors opened, she found Emeka standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He turned as she stepped into the room, his expression unreadable. You came back, he said, his voice low. Chioma took a deep breath, steadying herself. I've made my decision. Emeka set his glass down and walked toward her, his movements slow and deliberate. And? She met his gaze, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. I'll marry you. A faint smile tugged at his lips, but there was no warmth in it. I knew you would. Chioma's hands clenched into fists at her sides. But I have conditions. Emeka raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Go on. First, you clear my father's debt completely. No strings attached. Done. Second, I want a prenuptial agreement. I'm not after your money. Fair enough. And third, she said, her voice trembling slightly, this stays strictly business. No complications. Emeka's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. Agreed. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Chioma shook it. His grip was firm, his skin warm against hers, and for a brief moment, she felt a spark of something she couldn't quite name. "Welcome to the deal of a lifetime, Mrs. Okonkwo," he said, his tone laced with irony. The next morning, Chioma found herself seated across from Emeka in his lawyer's office. The room was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of Lagos. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, slid a stack of papers across the table. "This is the prenuptial agreement," he said, his tone businesslike. "It outlines the terms of your marriage, including the financial arrangements and the conditions for divorce." Chioma picked up the document, her eyes scanning the dense legal text. Her heart raced as she read the terms. "The marriage will last for 1 year, *. Emeka Okonkwo will clear all debts owed by Chioma's family, *. Chioma will receive a monthly allowance for personal expenses, *. The marriage will be strictly platonic, with no expectation of physical intimacy, *. Upon divorce, Chioma will receive a lump sum payment of 50 Nigerian nairas million, *. She looked up at Emeka, who was lounging in his chair, his expression unreadable. 50 million naira, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged. Consider it a bonus for playing your part. Chioma's stomach churned. The amount was staggering, more money than she'd ever seen in her life. But it felt wrong. Like she was selling herself. I don't want the money, she said firmly. Emeka raised an eyebrow. Then what do you want? I want my father's debt cleared, and that's it. I'm not doing this for profit. For the first time, Emeka looked genuinely surprised. He leaned forward, his dark eyes studying her intently. You're an interesting woman, Chioma Nwankwo. She held his gaze, refusing to back down. I'm not like the women you're used to, Mr. Okonkwo. I have principles. A faint smile played on his lips. Principles won't pay your bills. Maybe not, she said, but they'll let me sleep at night. The lawyer cleared his throat, breaking the tension. Shall we proceed? Chioma nodded, her hands trembling as she picked up a pen. She signed her name at the bottom of the document, her heart heavy with the weight of what she was agreeing to. Emeka signed next, his signature bold and confident. Congratulations, the lawyer said dryly. You're officially engaged. Later that day, Chioma found herself standing in the middle of a luxury boutique, surrounded by racks of designer gowns. Emeka had insisted on buying her a dress for their engagement party, which was scheduled for the following week. This one, he said, holding up a sleek red gown. Chioma shook her head. It's too revealing. He smirked. You're going to be my wife. You need to look the part. She glared at him. I'm not a mannequin, Mr. Okonkwo. Emeka, he corrected. You'll need to get used to saying my name. Chioma sighed, turning back to the racks. She finally settled on a simple yet elegant navy blue gown, its modest neckline and flowing silhouette more to her taste. As she stepped out of the dressing room, she caught Emeka's gaze. For a moment, his usual mask of indifference slipped, and she saw something in his eyes, admiration, perhaps, or something deeper. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. You'll do, he said, his tone dismissive. Chioma clenched her fists, biting back a retort. This was going to be a long year. The engagement party was held at Emeka's sprawling mansion in Ikoyi, a symbol of his wealth and power. The grand hall was adorned with crystal chandeliers, golden drapes, and cascading floral arrangements. Lagos's elite filled the room, their laughter and chatter creating a symphony of opulence. Chioma stood at the edge of the room, feeling like an outsider in her own life. She smoothed the fabric of her navy blue gown, her nerves fraying with every passing second. She had never been to an event like this before, and the sheer extravagance of it all was overwhelming. Emeka appeared beside her, his presence commanding as always. He looked every bit the billionaire CEO in his tailored black tuxedo, his tie perfectly knotted, and his cufflinks glinting under the chandelier light. "Ready?" he asked, his tone casual, as if this were just another business meeting. Chioma forced a smile. "As ready as I'll ever be." He offered her his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver down her spine, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. This was all for show, she reminded herself. As they made their way through the crowd, Chioma could feel the weight of everyone's stares. Whispers followed them, the guests clearly curious about the woman who had captured Emeka Okonkwo's heart. "Who is she?" someone murmured. "I've never seen her before," another replied. "She must be something special." Chioma's cheeks burned, but she kept her head held high. She wouldn't let them see her discomfort. At the center of the room, Emeka stopped and turned to face her. "Smile," he said under his breath. "You're supposed to be in love with me, remember?" She forced another smile, though it felt more like a grimace. "I'm trying." He leaned in closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Try harder." Before she could respond, a familiar voice called out. "Emeka." "There you are." Chioma turned to see a stunning woman approaching them. She was tall and elegant, her emerald green gown hugging her curves perfectly. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her smile was dazzling, but there was something in her eyes that made Chioma uneasy. "Amina," Emeka said, his tone polite but distant. "I didn't know you'd be here." Amina's smile widened as she glanced at Chioma. "And who is this?" "This is Chioma," Emeka said, his arm tightening around her. "My fiancée." Amina's smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. "Fiancé? How unexpected." Chioma extended her hand, trying to appear confident. "It's nice to meet you." Amina shook her hand, her grip firm. "Likewise. I'm Amina Adebayo, an old friend of Emeka's." The way she said friend made Chioma's stomach twist. She glanced at Emeka, but his expression was unreadable. "Well," Amina said, her tone light but her eyes sharp, "I suppose congratulations are in order. I never thought I'd see the day Emeka Okonkwo settled down." "Neither did I," Emeka replied, his tone dry. Amina laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Well, I'll leave you two to enjoy the party. Chioma, it was lovely meeting you." As she walked away, Chioma couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made an enemy. Later that night, as the party wound down, Chioma found herself alone on the balcony, the cool night air a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. She leaned against the railing, staring out at the city lights, her mind racing. "There you are," Emeka's voice came from behind her. She turned to see him approaching, his tie loosened and his jacket slung over his shoulder. He looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, and it suited him. "I needed some air," she said. He joined her at the railing, his shoulder brushing against hers. "You did well tonight." She raised an eyebrow. "Was that a compliment?" He smirked. "Don't get used to it." They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city drifting up to them. For the first time, Chioma felt a strange sense of peace in his presence. "Who is Amina?" she asked, breaking the silence. Emeka's expression darkened. "Someone from my past. It's not important." Chioma wanted to press further, but something in his tone stopped her. Instead, she said, "This is all so surreal. I never imagined my life would turn out like this." Emeka turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "Neither did I." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. Then Emeka stepped back, his usual mask of indifference slipping back into place. "We should get back inside," he said. The guests will be leaving soon. Chioma nodded, though her heart was still racing. As she followed him back into the mansion, she couldn't shake the feeling that this arrangement was going to be far more complicated than she'd anticipated. The morning after the engagement party, Chioma woke up in a guest room of Emika's mansion. The room was luxurious, with plush carpets, silk drapes, and a king-sized bed that felt like a cloud. But despite the comfort, she had barely slept. She sat up, running a hand through her tousled hair, and glanced at the clock on the nightstand. It was just past 7 a.m. She sighed, knowing she couldn't stay in bed any longer. As she made her way to the kitchen, she was surprised to find Emika already there, dressed in a crisp white shirt and tailored trousers. He was sipping a cup of coffee, his expression focused as he scrolled through something on his tablet. "Good morning," she said hesitantly. He looked up, his gaze briefly flickering over her. "Morning. Coffee?" She nodded, and he gestured to the sleek espresso machine on the counter. "Help yourself." Chioma busied herself with making a cup of coffee, the silence between them heavy with unspoken tension. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "About last night," she began. Emika set his tablet down, his expression unreadable. "What about it?" "Amina," she said, choosing her words carefully. "She seemed interested in you." He raised an eyebrow. "Jealous already?" Chioma's cheeks flushed. "No. I just think it's something we should talk about. If we're going to make this arrangement work, we need to be honest with each other." Emika leaned back in his chair, studying her with those piercing dark eyes. "Amina and I have history. But it's in the past. End of story." Chioma wanted to press further, but something in his tone warned her not to. Instead, she said, "Fine. But if she's going to be a problem, I need to know." Emika's lips curved into a faint smile. "You're feisty this morning." She glared at him. "I'm serious, Emika. This isn't a game to me." His smile faded, and for a moment, he looked almost vulnerable. "It's not a game to me either, Chioma." The intensity in his voice caught her off guard, and she found herself staring at him, searching for the truth behind his words. But before she could say anything, his phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. "I have to take this." He stood and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Chioma alone with her thoughts. Later that day, Chioma decided to explore the mansion. It was a sprawling estate, with countless rooms, a library, a home theater, and even a gym. She found herself in the library, running her fingers over the spines of the books, when she heard voices coming from the hallway. Curious, she stepped closer to the door, listening. "You're making a mistake, Emika," a woman's voice said. It was Amina. "This doesn't concern you," Emika replied, his tone cold. "Doesn't it?" Amina shot back. "You're throwing away everything we had for nobody." Chioma's heart sank at the words, but she forced herself to keep listening. "Amina," Emika said, his voice low and dangerous, "you need to leave. Now." There was a pause, and then Amina said, "This isn't over, Emika. You'll regret this." Chioma heard footsteps, and she quickly stepped back from the door, her heart racing. A moment later, Emika walked into the library, his expression dark. "Eavesdropping?" he asked, his tone sharp. Chioma crossed her arms, refusing to back down. "I wasn't trying to. But I heard enough to know that Amina isn't just someone from your past." Emika sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Amina and I were engaged. A long time ago. It didn't work out." Chioma's eyes widened. "You were engaged?" He nodded, his expression grim. "It's complicated. But it's over. She needs to move on." Chioma studied him, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the cold, calculating CEO she thought she knew. "Why didn't you tell me?" Because it's not important, he said, his tone final. Chioma wanted to argue, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was clenched. Instead, she said, if we're going to make this work, you need to trust me. Emeka looked at her, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, she thought he might say something, but then he simply nodded. I'll try. The days that followed the engagement party were a whirlwind of activity. Emeka's team had scheduled a series of public appearances for the newly engaged couple, and Chioma found herself thrust into a world of photo shoots, interviews, and charity events. It was during one of these events, a fundraiser for a children's hospital, that Chioma faced her first real test. The event was held at a luxurious hotel in Victoria Island, and the guest list included some of Lagos's most influential figures. Chioma wore a stunning emerald green gown, her hair styled in loose curls that cascaded over her shoulders. She looked every bit the billionaire's fiancée, but inside, she was a bundle of nerves. As they entered the ballroom, Emeka took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. Just follow my lead, he murmured. Chioma nodded, forcing a smile as they were greeted by a sea of familiar faces. She quickly realized that many of the guests were the same people who had attended their engagement party, and their curiosity about her hadn't waned. Chioma, darling, a woman exclaimed, pulling her into a hug. You look absolutely radiant. Chioma recognized her as Mrs. Adebayo, the wife of a prominent politician. Thank you, she said, her smile genuine this time. The woman leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I must say, you've certainly surprised us all. Emeka Okonkwo, settling down. Who would have thought? Chioma laughed nervously, unsure how to respond. Thankfully, Emeka stepped in, his arm slipping around her waist. Chioma has a way of surprising people, he said, his tone light but his eyes sharp. Mrs. Adebayo chuckled. Well, I wish you both the best. You make a lovely couple. As they moved through the crowd, Chioma couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching them, analyzing their every move. She leaned closer to Emeka, her voice low. Do they always stare like this? He smirked. Get used to it. You're the woman who tamed Emeka Okonkwo. She rolled her eyes. I didn't tame you. Didn't you? He teased, his tone playful. Chioma's cheeks flushed, but before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the noise. Emeka. Chioma. How wonderful to see you both. They turned to see Amina approaching, her smile dazzling but her eyes cold. She was dressed in a sleek black gown that hugged her figure perfectly, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew she was the most beautiful woman in the room. Amina, Emeka said, his tone polite but distant. I didn't know you'd be here. I wouldn't miss it, she replied, her gaze flickering to Chioma. Chioma, you look lovely. Chioma forced a smile. Thank you. So do you. Amina's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. I was just telling Emeka the other day how unexpected your engagement was. But I suppose love works in mysterious ways. Chioma's stomach twisted at the thinly veiled jab, but she refused to let it show. It does, she said, her tone steady. But when you know, you know. Amina's smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. Well, I wish you both the best. Emeka, you know where to find me if you change your mind. With that, she walked away, leaving Chioma and Emeka standing in stunned silence. Later that night, as they drove back to the mansion, Chioma couldn't hold back any longer. What was that about? She asked, her tone sharp. Emeka glanced at her, his expression unreadable. What do you mean? Amina, she said, her frustration bubbling over. She's clearly not over you, and she's not going to make this easy for me. Emeka sighed, running a hand through his hair. Amina is complicated. But she's not a threat to us. Not a threat. Chioma repeated, her voice rising. She's practically throwing herself at you, and you're acting like it's no big deal. Emika's jaw tightened. I can't control how she acts, Chioma. But I can control how I respond. And I've made it clear that I'm with you. Chioma stared at him, her heart pounding. Is that all this is to you? A business arrangement? Because it's starting to feel like I'm the only one taking this seriously. Emika's expression softened, and for a moment, he looked almost vulnerable. Chioma, this isn't just business to me. But we both knew what we were getting into. We have to play the part, even when it's hard. Chioma wanted to argue, but something in his tone stopped her. Instead, she leaned back in her seat, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. The tension between Chioma and Emika lingered long after the fundraiser. Days turned into a week, and the atmosphere in the mansion grew increasingly strained. Chioma found herself spending more time alone, exploring the vast estate or burying herself in books from the library. Emika, on the other hand, seemed to be avoiding her, burying himself in work and late-night meetings. One evening, Chioma decided she'd had enough. She waited for Emika in the living room, her arms crossed and her foot tapping impatiently as the clock ticked past midnight. Finally, she heard the sound of the front door opening, followed by Emika's footsteps. He walked into the living room, his tie loosened and his jacket slung over his shoulder. He looked tired, but his expression hardened when he saw her. You're still up, he said, his tone neutral. We need to talk, Chioma said, her voice firm. Emika sighed, running a hand through his hair. Can it wait? It's been a long day. No, it can't, she replied, standing up. You've been avoiding me, Emika. And I want to know why. He set his jacket down on the couch, his expression unreadable. I haven't been avoiding you. I've been busy. Busy? Chioma repeated, her frustration bubbling over. Or is it just easier to pretend I don't exist? Emika's jaw tightened. That's not fair, Chioma. Isn't it? She shot back. You brought me into this arrangement, and now you're acting like I'm some kind of burden. If you didn't want to deal with me, you shouldn't have proposed this in the first place. Emika's eyes flashed with anger, and he took a step closer to her. You think this is easy for me? Do you have any idea what it's like to have everyone watching your every move, analyzing your every decision? I'm trying to protect you, Chioma, whether you realize it or not. Protect me, she said, her voice rising. From what? Amina? Or from yourself? The room fell silent, the tension between them palpable. Emika stared at her, his chest rising and falling with each breath. For a moment, Chioma thought he might walk away, but instead, he closed the distance between them, his voice low and intense. You want to know why I've been avoiding you, he said, his eyes burning into hers. Because every time I'm near you, I forget that this is supposed to be an arrangement. I forget that this isn't real. Chioma's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding as his words sank in. Emika. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. This is supposed to be business, Chioma. But the more time I spend with you, the harder it is to remember that. Chioma stared at him, her mind racing. She wanted to say something, to tell him that she felt the same way, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she whispered, What are we doing, Emika? He looked at her, his expression a mix of frustration and longing. I don't know. But I do know that this is getting complicated. Chioma's chest tightened, and she turned away, unable to meet his gaze. Maybe we should take a step back. Focus on the arrangement and nothing else. Emika was silent for a long moment before he finally nodded. Maybe you're right. The next morning, Chioma woke up to an empty mansion. Emika had left early for work, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She wandered into the kitchen, where a note on the counter caught her eye. I'll be out of town for a few days. We'll talk when I get back. Asterisk. Chioma sighed, crumpling the note in her hand. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear: their arrangement was no longer just business. Emika's absence left a void in the mansion that Chioma hadn't anticipated. The grand halls felt emptier, the silence more pronounced. She tried to keep herself busy, reading, exploring the gardens, even attempting to cook, but her thoughts kept drifting back to their argument. Every time I'm near you, I forget that this is supposed to be an arrangement. Asterisk. His words echoed in her mind, stirring emotions she wasn't ready to face. She had agreed to this marriage to save her family, but now, it felt like she was losing herself in the process. On the third day of Emika's absence, Chioma decided to visit her family. She needed a reminder of why she had agreed to this arrangement in the first place. Her father's face lit up when he saw her, and her younger siblings rushed to hug her. For a few hours, she was able to forget about the chaos of her new life and simply be with her family. "How are you, Chioma?" her father asked as they sat in the small living room. She forced a smile. "I'm fine, Papa. Everything's going well." He studied her, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to pretend with me, my daughter. I can see that something is troubling you." Chioma sighed, her shoulders slumping. "It's just complicated. Emika is complicated." Her father nodded, his gaze understanding. "Marriage is never easy, especially when it begins under unusual circumstances. But remember why you're doing this. You're strong, Chioma. Stronger than you realize." His words brought her a measure of comfort, but they also made her realize something: she couldn't keep running from her feelings. She needed to confront them, no matter how difficult it might be. Meanwhile, Emika was hundreds of miles away, attending a business conference in Abuja. He had hoped the distance would help him clear his head, but it only made things worse. Everywhere he went, he was reminded of Chioma. The way she laughed, the way she stood up to him, the way she made him feel things he hadn't felt in years. He had tried to convince himself that their arrangement was purely transactional, but the truth was, he was falling for her. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Emika found himself sitting in his hotel room, staring at his phone. He wanted to call her, to hear her voice, but he didn't know what to say. Instead, he scrolled through the photos from their engagement party. There was one in particular that caught his eye: Chioma standing on the balcony, her navy blue gown flowing in the breeze, her expression soft and contemplative. She looked beautiful. Emika sighed, running a hand through his hair. He had always prided himself on being in control, but Chioma had a way of unraveling him. Back in Lagos, Chioma returned to the mansion, her resolve stronger than ever. She wasn't going to let fear or uncertainty dictate her actions. She was going to face this head-on. That night, as she lay in bed, her phone buzzed. She picked it up, her heart skipping a beat when she saw Emika's name on the screen. "I'll be back tomorrow. We need to talk." Asterisk. Chioma stared at the message, her mind racing. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: she was ready to fight for it. Emika returned to the mansion the following evening, his presence filling the space with a tension that was both familiar and unsettling. Chioma waited for him in the living room, her heart pounding as she heard the front door open. He walked in, his suit slightly rumpled and his expression weary but determined. When his eyes met hers, there was a flicker of something: relief, perhaps, or longing. "Chioma," he said, his voice low. "Emika," she replied, standing up. "Welcome back." They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken words. Finally, Emika broke the silence. "We need to talk," he said, echoing the message he'd sent her the night before. Chioma nodded. "I know." He gestured to the couch, and they sat down, the distance between them feeling both too close and too far. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Emika began, his tone measured. "About us. About this arrangement. Chioma's heart raced, but she kept her expression calm. And? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I thought I could keep this strictly business. I thought I could keep my emotions out of it. But the truth is, Chioma, I can't. Her breath caught in her throat, but she didn't interrupt. You've changed something in me, he continued, his voice softer now. I don't know how to explain it, but being with you, even in this arrangement, has made me feel things I haven't felt in a long time. Maybe ever. Chioma stared at him, her mind racing. She had expected many things from this conversation, but not this. Emeka, she began, but he held up a hand, stopping her. Let me finish, he said. I know this isn't what we agreed to. I know this complicates things. But I can't keep pretending that this is just business. Not when I feel the way I do about you. Chioma's chest tightened, and she looked down at her hands, trying to process his words. What are you saying? He reached out, gently tilting her chin up so she was looking at him. I'm saying that I want this to be real, Chioma. I want us to be real. For a moment, Chioma was speechless. She had spent so much time trying to protect herself, to keep her emotions in check, that she hadn't allowed herself to fully acknowledge her own feelings. But now, as she looked into Emeka's eyes, she realized that she felt the same way. Emeka, she said, her voice trembling, I want that too. A slow smile spread across his face, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. He leaned in closer, his hand still gently cupping her chin. Are you sure? Chioma nodded, her heart pounding. I'm sure. And then, as if drawn together by an invisible force, they closed the distance between them, in a hot meeting with the possibilities that lay ahead. When they finally pulled away, Chioma felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. So what happens now? She asked, her voice soft. Emeka smiled, his thumb brushing against her cheek. Now, we take it one day at a time. Together. The days that followed their heartfelt conversation were a whirlwind of emotions. Chioma and Emeka spent every moment they could together, exploring the depths of their newfound connection. The mansion, once a place of tension and uncertainty, now felt like a home filled with warmth and possibility. One evening, as they sat together in the library, Chioma leaned her head against Emeka's shoulder, a book resting in her lap. Do you think we're crazy? She asked, her voice soft. Emeka chuckled, his arm tightening around her. Probably. But I don't care. Chioma smiled, her heart swelling with affection. Neither do I. But as much as they tried to focus on each other, the outside world refused to be ignored. The first challenge came in the form of Amina. Chioma was in the garden, tending to the flowers, when she heard the sound of heels clicking against the stone pathway. She turned to see Amina approaching, her expression unreadable. Chioma, Amina said, her tone polite but cold. I was hoping we could talk. Chioma straightened, brushing the dirt off her hands. Of course. What's on your mind? Amina crossed her arms, her gaze sharp. I'll get straight to the point. I don't know what game you're playing with Emeka, but I suggest you end it before you get hurt. Chioma's eyes narrowed. I'm not playing any games, Amina. Emeka and I are in a committed relationship. Amina laughed, but there was no humor in it. Committed? Please. Emeka doesn't do commitment. He's using you, just like he uses everyone else. Chioma's chest tightened, but she refused to back down. You don't know him like I do. Don't I? Amina shot back, her voice rising. I've known Emeka for years. I know how he operates. And I know that once he gets what he wants, he'll toss you aside like yesterday's news. Chioma took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. I'm sorry you feel that way, Amina. But Emeka and I are happy together. And nothing you say will change that. Amina's expression darkened, and for a moment, Chioma thought she might say something more. But then she simply turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Chioma standing alone in the garden. Later that night, Chioma told Emeka about the encounter. "Amina came to see me today," she said, her voice hesitant. Emeka's expression darkened. "What did she say?" Chioma sighed, leaning against him. "She thinks you're using me. That once you get what you want, you'll toss me aside." Emeka's jaw tightened, and he pulled her closer. "She's wrong, Chioma. You're not just some passing fancy to me. You're everything." Chioma looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "I know. And I trust you, Emeka. But I can't help feeling like there's more to your history with Amina than you've told me." Emeka was silent for a long moment before he finally spoke. "Amina and I were engaged, yes. But it wasn't what you think. She was more interested in my money and status than in me. When I realized that, I ended things. But she's never forgiven me for it." Chioma's chest tightened, and she reached up to cup his face. "I'm sorry, Emeka. That must have been hard." He leaned into her touch, his expression softening. "It was. But it led me to you. And I wouldn't change that for anything." As the days turned into weeks, Chioma and Emeka continued to build their relationship, facing each challenge together. But the biggest test was yet to come. The months that followed were a testament to the strength of Chioma and Emeka's love. They faced challenges, Amina's lingering presence, the scrutiny of the public eye, and the occasional clash of their strong personalities, but they faced them together. One evening, as the sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emeka took Chioma to the rooftop of the mansion. The city lights sparkled below, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. "Chioma," Emeka said, his voice soft but filled with emotion, "I brought you up here because I wanted to remind you of something." She turned to him, her heart fluttering at the intensity in his eyes. "What is it?" He took her hands in his touch warm and reassuring. "I want to remind you of how far we've come. From a business arrangement to this. To us. You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible, and I can't imagine a future without you." Chioma's breath caught in her throat as Emeka dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Chioma Nwankwo," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I know we started this journey under unusual circumstances, but what we have now is real. Will you marry me? Not for business, not for appearances, but because I love you with all my heart." Tears filled Chioma's eyes as she nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, Emeka. Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a stunning diamond that sparkled in the fading light, and then stood, pulling her into his arms. Their kiss was filled with all the love, passion, and promise of the future they would build together. The wedding was a celebration of their love, attended by family, friends, and even a few curious onlookers. Chioma wore a breathtaking white gown, her smile radiant as she walked down the aisle toward Emeka. He stood at the altar, his eyes filled with love and pride, waiting to make her his wife. As they exchanged vows, the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them and the love they had fought so hard to protect. "I promise to love you, to stand by you, and to cherish every moment we have together," Chioma said, her voice steady and filled with emotion. "And I promise to love you, to protect you, and to never take a single day with you for granted," Emeka replied, his voice deep and sincere. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted into applause, but Chioma and Emeka only had eyes for each other. As they danced together at the reception, Chioma rested her head against Emeka's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you think we're crazy?" she asked, echoing the question she had asked him weeks before. Emeka chuckled, his arms tightening around her. "Probably. But I wouldn't have it any other way." Chioma smiled, her heart full. "Neither would I.